Hey now, welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track, America's leading Formula One podcast. I'm Brian, that's Rob. We are over halfway through the off-season. We are on the downhill glide to testing. I hope you're as excited as I am. I'm excited you're here. Rob, are you excited, buddy?
I'm super excited. I'm also super excited about what we've got coming up today. Hot on the heels of last week's chat with Matt Bishop, which has just gone insane on the numbers. In 1 week, that's now become our second most listened to episode ever. Hot on the heels. Well, I say hot on the heels of Mr. Villeneuve. He's got a while to go to catch him, but it's just been insane. We've had some great feedback. Now, if last week's episodes and this week's episode are kind of like sectors in a lap time, then we definitely set a purple sector last week. This week, I think we've got another purple sector.
Agreed.
A very different guest, but somebody that I've followed for a long time. It was our pleasure to talk to Spanners Ready from the Missed Apex podcast. I think you said it in the interview, Brian, or afterwards, but the generosity of people that we've probably got no right to talk to. Matt last week, Spanners this week. They're just great. It was a great chat with him. So we're going to smash through some news and social that we found, and then the main part of the episode will be us catching up with Spanners. So talking about catching up and chit-chat, the stuff I found most this week, Brian, was... I don't know if it's mind games or positioning, but there's lots of little sound bites coming out of different camps. We'll go through one at a time. But Charles... hey, I did some video diving for once. On his YouTube channel, there was a chat with him, and he said he's feeling more mature, he's learned from the personal mistakes he made, and he's ready to fight for the championship.
So wait,
it's all cool. It's all
this
good
is the
stuff.
same Charles who loves to say this on the radio all the time?
I am stupid. I am stupid.
Yeah,
I switch everything off. I get out of car.
So, okay, great. That's exactly what he's supposed to say. But I started looking at it and thinking, is that already Charles positioning himself as number one driver?
Right.
Because I'm ready, I won't have the mistakes this year, I'm going to go for the title. At the same time, Carlo is over on the other side saying, I really want to work on my consistency this year. Now, is that code for I want to be a good wingman? What do you make of those two sound bites?
I mean, I agree with you on the first, and I disagree with you on the second.
Okay.
I think Carlos wants to be consistent so he doesn't end up in the gravel at every race, as he did for 6 of the first 10 last year. But no, I think Carlos is coming into this thinking he can be number one. He should have that mindset. It hasn't clearly been given to Charles, I don't think.
It's not a very strong rally cry, is it? What are you going to do this year, Carlo? Going to be consistent.
Well, I mean, he won his first race. He had pace. He was pretty good throughout the year. It's just the trips to the gravel or getting taken off by George or whatever it may be.
Going to put my tinfoil hat on for a second. My tinfoil Ferrari hat. New boss has come in, taken the drivers to one side and said, the way we need to do this, lads, is we're really going to need to have an attack on both fronts. And in order to attack on the constructors, Charles is going to be out there going for the drivers. Carlo, you're going to bring home the bacon and give good points rather than spending all your time in the gravel trap. It's that way, my way or the highway, on we go, onwards and upwards.
Yeah, I don't think Fred sat them down and had that conversation. I don't think he said, Charles is going to be number one, and Carlos, you just stay out of the gravel.
Question? You don't...
I don't think that's how that went.
Okay, fair enough. Aston Martin, I love these. This one for me is a pointless one. Yeah. It's like someone's shoved a microphone in Alonso's face, and what the hell is he supposed to say? He's talking up Aston Martin. I'm glad I came here. There's a special atmosphere and an energy and a motivation in the team that I've never seen before. What's he? Yeah. It was just like a pointless.
They have a car. I like to drive. They're going to put me in the car to drive. I mean, yeah, I don't. So George feels 2023 will be a return to the team fighting for both title fronts. And then separately, Lewis was interviewed, and I found this just for you, Rob. Lewis was interviewed and informed there's never been a driver in the history of F1 that would win a race after doing 300 starts. Your favorite stat.
Yep.
Lewis shot back and said, but there's never been a driver like me. Ooh. So I love that. I agree with you. He will win at least one this year and break the 300 stat. But then Toto, who has to be the voice of reason. He doesn't want people's expectations to go through the roof. He basically said, we're going to start the season no nearer to Red Bull. I don't know what that meant. Like, I understand the words that are coming out of his mouth, but I don't know what it meant. Meaning at the end of last year, when they were getting much closer to Red Bull, or the gap at the beginning of 2022, where they both start off fresh, clean sheets of paper, and they're going to be that far behind again. Because if it's at the end of 22, it wasn't that big a delta.
I think he's toying with us
it.
all, and he's just being completely factual, and he's on about the locations of the garages in the pit lane. They won't physically be any nearer to Red Bull this year.
We will be the same amount of garages away
Sorry,
from them.
yes.
Yeah.
We'll be 50 feet or whatever we were before, just like we were last year. I think it's the mind games of Toto already. He hasn't said anything factually incorrect, nor has he given us anything to go on. Talking about consistency. Good old Steiner has said that Hulkenberg. Or have we got? No, we're going to play it.
Well, which one? Because there are two.
Any of them. You love all your Hulkenberg.
Can I do the full one? Is it okay? We need this one.
Hülkenberg.
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 Sag's mal ein bisschen männlich.
Hey.
Hülkenberg.
Hülkenberg.
Genau.
Nico Hülkenberg.
Nico
Yes.
Hülkenberg.
Wait, the good one's coming.
I forgot how long it was.
15 seconds of joy.
Anyway, I'm taking this. I'm being a bit mean, really, because obviously he's taken Mick's seat. But he's basically said he's got a free pass for the first 2 to 3 races because he said his mission is consistency to bring home points on a regular basis, but doesn't expect that to happen over the first 2 to 3 races. Which, do you know what? Fair enough. New team. In you come. He's not expecting points from day one. So, joking aside and putting my feelings for Mick to one side, that's what Haas needed. They need to double down on last year. They've set themselves a new benchmark, and they just got to make sure they don't then do a back and join Williams at the back of the grid.
Agreed. And so, but that was also, if you remember, the only rationale I could come up with for why they put Nico in the car at the time. I couldn't come up with anything else except just that little bit of consistency and a little bit of damage limitation from the cost cap and other things. But can I just say something about Mick? There was a website that I had not been familiar with called Formu1A.uno. And I'm sure I've mispronounced the way they thought of it when they came up. It looks like Formula 1.uno, but it's the one is the... Anyway, so they had a quote. And again, I'm passing it along, so buyer beware. Franz Tost on AlphaTauri's 2023 lineup. Quote, I would have actually liked to have had Mick in the car. End quote. What? If that's true, is that real? I don't know.
I don't know. Then we get a good old soundbite from old Marco. And this one just feels is it mind games, or is he then looking at the Mercedes at the end of last year? But he said he fears Mercedes more than he fears Ferrari. It's a bit of a double whammy. You got to heap the pressure on Mercedes because we think you look good, and kind of is a little bit of a sideways jab at Ferrari saying,
sort of. I mean, it is, especially given the fact that they were their number one competition for a good portion of last year and then faded away quicker than the pet rock. And then Valtteri had a note out that he wants to talk about his future and get that sorted early in the season to avoid any of the craziness at the end of the year that always entails. Apparently doesn't want to be, part of the musical chairs that gets discussed at the end of the year, which, you know what? More power to him. He led that team to amazing stuff last year. I think he deserves it.
I'm going to struggle to give a real life example right now, and maybe one of the listeners can let us know, but I'm pretty sure that tends to happen, that you'll get a driver tends to lock in early at the beginning of the year. Someone whose stock is high and doesn't need to get involved in the silly season can just get it out of the way, concentrate on the season and get it done. Then everyone else does the whole musical chairs thing.
So, separate note, F1 published the list of 10 changes to know about. And we thought we'd hit them here. And as we were going through them during the week, Rob and I realized we'd hit a lot of these already. So, I mean, basically, the dirty side of the track is the place you need to come for all of your information. 1, the ride height and the diffuser is adjusted to reduce porpoising. We've talked about that. Stronger roll hoops after Zhou Guanyu's crash. We talked about that. A reduction in the car weight. And I found this one interesting. We did talk about it, but the specifics were fascinating. 2 kilograms. Reduction in the minimum car weight, which is 4.4 pounds. So for everyone in America, just skip 1 burrito at Chipotle and you are fine. They've revised the mirrors to improve visibility. We talked about that. Obviously, Lance will try to figure out how to use these because he couldn't figure out the last ones. Sorry, Lance fans. But then, as we did also mention, they doubled the number of sprint events. And there'll be 6, right? And so Azerbaijan, Austria, Belgium, Qatar, US at Circuit of the Americas, and Brazil. And so it'll be fun to see them. I know I'm one of the people who kind of likes the sprints, and I'm kind of in the minority on that. But I think if they keep tweaking it a little bit, they'll find the right formula and the right recipe, because I think it could really be something special. It ain't there yet, but I like it.
I think I go to where my real out there idea was to have a sprint championship and a race championship. So the sprint points only accumulate to a separate sprint championship. It would keep. I like the sprint format. I kind of don't like the way it interferes with the drivers' championship, and I don't like some aspects of it. But I think you're right. there's something in there. They need to kind of noodle on it a bit, keep messing around with the format maybe until they get the majority of people loving it, or eventually cut and run and don't bother with it. But it's deserved to have another outing this year, I would say.
What would the trophy be? I mean, like I run a bowling league with a bunch of guys, and we used to give out trophies at the end of the season before we got a belt, and I would find the best discarded trophies I could find on the internet. And I gave away once a 5th grade girls dance champion trophy to the guy who won. Would that be the trophy for this?
Well,
I don't
who knows?
understand.
Because in Formula One, we don't bother having a big fanfare and actually seeing the Drivers' Title Championship. It's just at that stupid black tie gala dinner at the end, and it gets never really seen. So one of the most bizarre things about Formula is that every other trophy, almost for every other sport in the world, is iconic. Whether it's the Super Bowl, whether it's the World Cup, whether it's the Champions League trophy.
Yeah, the NFL.
You know what the trophy looks like, right?
Yeah.
And you see it being given out. And Drivers' Title, you don't.
That's true. That's true. I don't watch prize giving because prize giving isn't really a word in the U.S., so it just didn't make sense. Anyway, a couple other ones here. I'll do 6. They cut the paddock working hours. I think it was an hour a couple days. They cut some time to reduce the amount the teams could be there without going into penalties. Rob, I love your thoughts on this one, and I have some strong ones. So they're changing a little bit the qualifying format. At 2 races next year, and I'm going to quote, "For purpose of evaluating whether the revisions are suitable for subsequent championships, they will try using tire compounds. So Q1 hard tires for everybody, Q2 medium tires for everybody, and if you keep progressing in Q3, you can get to the soft tires, and that assumes it's a dry race and a dry quali, I should say. So I'm gonna save my powder till after you, because I'm a tire guy from a strategic perspective, not just the rubber perspective. But what are your thoughts on this?
I couldn't hate this more unless they were going to introduce a 4th round of quali, that before you get in the car, the first one is all the drivers have to run around the track, and whoever makes it through gets... all these cars that have to fight with their setup to try to get, the hard tyre doesn't really work well for us, we're better runners on the mediums, and in quali you're probably just going to run the soft. So, and they discarded that rule that you liked, which I do agree with, the tyre choice one that they shouldn't have got rid of, but to replace it with this now... Yeah. That means any car at any of these events that doesn't work well on the hards is instantly not making it through. And it's all artificial. What's the point? It's
fake.
Just,
agreed.
Oh.
I like the fact they're thinking about it, but just go back to the last approach. It had strategic ramifications for the race. You had to debate, did you want to start the race on softs or would you go medium? So in Q2, you had to figure out what tire you were going to use. And were you going to risk not getting into Q1 by running a medium so that you could start the race on that exact same set of mediums? And I love the fact that Verstappen one time in 21, when he was racing against Lewis so tightly, bricked his tires by locking up the exact set he would have to use. So he went back out on an extra set of mediums to try to beat that time and not start with a square tire. That is exciting and fun. Bring that one back, not
I've
this
just
one.
solved it. I've just sorted it for them now.
I bet you did.
Qualifying from now on
uses
1 tyre on the car of each compound. You get to choose whether you want the rear left to be hard and the right rear to be medium and the front left to be soft and the front right to be maybe inters or something, but that'll be the new rule. You put 1 compound per wheel, and the strategy comes into, if the inside left is going to get the most load bearing through the corners, then maybe you're going to go for the soft for the grip on that one. So yeah, there it is, done.
I like it. I also would suggest the Le Mans start. I believe that's what it's called, where drivers on one side of the grid and the cars on the other, and they have to run across and get strapped in, and whoever can get the team moving the fastest takes off. That's how they should start, especially with the rules and how hard it is to get in. See people move a little faster. There were a couple.
Let's get going. We've got to get to Spanish.
Couple tweaks around gearbox changes I didn't understand, so sorry. A move up, a clear up on the penalty confusion. And so remember last year when people took a bunch of engine penalties and they're like, who starts where? Classified drivers who have accrued more than 15 cumulative grid position penalties or have been penalized to start at the back of the grid will start behind any other classified driver. Their relative position will be determined in accordance with their qualifying classification. Clear as mud. Well,
I'm sorry, I fell asleep during that.
Well, don't worry. I got one last one. More flexibility to cool fuel. We did talk about this one.
We did.
Mike Crack and Aston Martin took the penalty last year, 2 years ago. But here's the rule. And again, if this makes sense to you, tell me. Fuel in a car must not be colder than the lowest of either 10 degrees centigrade below ambient temperature or 10 degrees centigrade, this being cut from 20 degrees, at any time when the car is running after leaving the competitor's designated garage area. Great. Got it. Could we make these any more complicated, F1? But enough.
Right, very wrapping this up then. So, little things we saw around Miami. The team paddock and hospitality now be inside the stadium, and they're going to resurface the track, and they're going to have a permanent 190,000 square foot paddock club above the pits. So, they're making some tweaks. There's been a bit of a pushback there now. It looks like there's going to be quite a walk from the paddock through. I'm not sure how big the stadium is, how big a walk that is, but get your step count in for the day.
And it is right there. It's right outside the stadium. We had a quick SAP stat that I found that I thought was interesting. SAP stats. So if you look at the drivers who have never won on F1 but been around to score a lot of points, the most points without a win, and we've kind of hit on this one, but I just wanted to run down the list so people get a feel for who they are. Nick Heidfeld, Martin Brundle, our favorite, one of our favorite commentators. He's actually also never led a lap, but that's a different stat for another day. Third in most points without a win, Nico Hulkenberg. I won't play the 15-second clip again. Lando, Derek Warwick, Chris Amon, Roman Grosjean, Stefan Johansson, Eddie Cheever, Andrea De Crasheris, Mika Salo, Jan Beira, who I don't know, Jean-Pierre Jarier, I don't know, Harry Schell, and Alexander
I'm loving
Wurz.
the name pronunciation.
I'm working on it. But
Pretty sure it's Derek Warwick as well and not Derek Warwick. But
what did I say?
Warwick.
Whoops. And so my point is, these 10 drivers through the history, or actually 15 drivers through the history of F1, who have scored all these points and never won, the only one on this list to never get a podium is Nico Hulkenberg.
Oof.
That's rough. So do you think he'll break that at Haas?
No.
Really? You don't think there's a podium? No, I don't agree.
I don't think there's a podium in it for.
Yeah, agreed. Couple other notes. We already talked a little bit about some of these, but I would say the quick thing that I found interesting. All of the teammate changes. Do you know how many teams have been teammates for at least one season? Of the 10 teams, because of new drivers and moving around, how many of them worked together last year as teammates?
Well, so we covered this last week when we did the when we did the preview or the 2023 view, but we covered it in a different way, and we just covered like who were like together. So until I saw this graphic, it hadn't hit me in the face as how many of them have like almost got no history.
Crazy,
it's insane. So I'll let you found it. I'll let you.
Just 4 teams are going into this year with the same drivers. 4, and 2 of them were brand new last year. At Alfa Romeo with Valtteri and Joe, and then at Mercedes with Lewis and George. Ferrari and Red Bull had 2 years, at this point, have 2 years under their belt together. And everybody else is a new teammate pairing.
Yeah.
Crazy. And then one last rumor that I found fascinating around Ferrari. There's a story out there from Gazzetta Italia that Ferrari has found 30 horsepower in its engine through reliability fixes and after having to turn down the 2022 power unit because of their reliability challenges, turning it back up with those reliability fixes, 30 horsepower. The same story, again, take this with a grain of salt. Merck found 16 horsepower and Red Bull 10. And the Ferrari 30 horsepower has actually proven them 1 second faster in their simulator, according to a separate note. So if either of those are true, watch out for Ferrari. If neither of them are true, we will refund your money.
I mean, if they can get that car faster, that just means they can get round to the pits to have their strategy messed up quicker. So yeah, it'll sort out well.
That's terrible.
Okay, so I think now we're going to segue over to our chat with Spanners Ready. He basically founded Missed Apex podcast about 7 or 8 years ago, and they've gone on and they're massive. I think, and he might have said it in the interview, or he might have said it in the chat afterwards, so you can listen and find out to fact check me, but I think they're ranked as one of the highest independent podcasts now. The only people above them in the F1 space are kind of the big boys, like funded by the BBC, or, who are WTF1, kind of professional outfits. So it was great to speak to him. So let's listen in and find out how it went. Okay, we had a lot of good feedback from episodes where we actually get people on that know what they're talking about. So to keep the spirit of dulling down the content from Rob and Brian, it's our great pleasure to welcome Richard Reddy, a.k.a. Spanners, from the Missed Apex podcast. So welcome to the dirty side of the track, Spanners.
Welcome. I deliberately qualified on this side so that I would get a poor start off the line and lull my opponents into a false sense of security, but gain the slipstream into turn 1. I don't want to disappoint anyone. People who know what they're talking about. The key to that, I would say, would be deliver it with confidence, and then but also heavily caveat it. So you have to have a contract with your audience. If you set yourself up as a subject matter expert and it's wrong, the stakes are high. So you come out with an expert opinion and you can be, it can be demonstrated that what you said is wrong. That's a disaster. So what you got to do is set yourself up as a somewhat likable but useful idiot who asks the right questions. So no, do I know what I'm talking about? No. but I've been saying things for long enough that I know how to express my opinions with confidence. Hello, Rob. Hello, Brian.
Thanks for joining us, Spanners. I think if you were to take a poll of all the Dirty Siders, you'd find on 0 fingers the amount of people who think that Rob and I know what we're talking about. So that's great. We've all got the bar nice and low. We can walk right over it.
To start with, you're an American, so you've been watching it since Drive to Survive, I assume, and therefore only know things that Christian Horner has said around his dinner table. That's not true at all. Are you a Drive to Survive F1 fan, Brian?
I liked seasons 1 and 2. 3 got a little bit full of drama, and 4 was too much drama for me. And 5, I anticipate they'll use Kimi Räikkönen radio for Max's messages. But I've been a fan for a while. Started a long time ago when it was sort of the secret handshake society here in the States.
I know, especially with Americans. So on Missed Apex Podcast, go and follow that at missedapexpodcast.com. I have an American co-host. And when we started doing F1 podcasting in like 2014, it was such a novelty to have an American co-host. It was like, wow,
we found one of them
from America land. And I'd have him on because it's like, oh, it makes us sound like we've got someone from the telly. You know, he sounded like a movie. Hey, everybody, race cars. And they're like, oh, aren't you just into ovals and that? It's like, no, I'm into the Formula One. And it was great. But for the long-standing Formula One fans from America, you must all now have to face this. Are you a DTS fan? Not that there's anything wrong at all with having recently fallen in love with the sport. But you have to sort of like justify, no, I know who Luca Badoa is.
Let me tell you all about Jim Clark. So no, it's no. You know what? That's a great question.
Brian. All my time.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think we have a good mix of folks here in the States who are newer fans, older fans, and who have different teams that they kind of root for and drivers. So it's fun. It's been great. But I'd like to know, Spanners, if I may call you Spanners.
Of course you can.
Thank you. How did you start your podcast? What was the genesis of you guys starting all those years ago?
Do you know what? I love the medium. I've always been an F1 fan, but honestly, like since I was a kid, I wanted to get into radio, and I had like high ambitions to get into radio. Went along to student radio with my mixtape, you know, my demo tape of me talking over tracks, and they went, no. And then I recorded myself on tape, and then later on CDs around to every radio station in every town. They go, no. And then, you know, went off and did my career. And then like my wife pointed out to me like way too late, like 2008, these things called podcasts exist. And you go, oh, that's great. And I listened to some of them, and I listened to podcasts and went, these are terrible. Like literally anyone can do it. And I was like, this is great. This is like I can record stuff. I can put it out there. I don't have to ask anyone's permission. And then so basically I started off podcasting about with my wife about parenting and how horrible it is to have little tiny children. Don't do it. It's an absolute nightmare. Children don't get good until they're about 4, 5, probably 6. I've got a 10 and 12-year-old and they're still pretty awful. And then my wife didn't want to do it anymore. So, because like we were doing it as like, you know, let's talk through our issues instead of arguing, and it would turn into real arguments. And it was like, and so then I was like, you know, a pal of mine, and I said, well, let's do a podcast about how horrible it is to be a dad and dealing with all this as well. And then I started blogging about F1. I joined a blogging team on a website. We started a podcast, and then there was a war, an internal war in that podcast. Everyone fell out, and I simply slaughtered all my rivals in that battle. And then Missed Apex came out of the mix of that. So really my love of the medium is what brought me into podcasting. I love broadcasting. And the fact that when, like you said, like F1 fans used to be so few and far in between, there was genuinely no one to talk to about Formula One. You'd say to people at work, did you catch the race? And they don't know what you're talking about at all. So it was a way, I found my way into that community. And then slowly people started listening to Missed Apex Podcast, missedapexpodcast.com. And I suddenly found we became the focal point of a small community. Yeah. And week in, week out, people were like me who had no one to talk about F1 with, were directing that stuff at us. And it's just addictive. And my favorite sport, my favorite hobby just became the focal point of this community. And it was wonderful.
That's brilliant. And the podcast is fantastic for everybody on the dirty side who's looking for a secondary, non-dirty side podcast. Secondary, the important part.
Where would they go? What website would they go to?
Missed Apex. I mean, you know, and follow Spanners at Spanners Ready on Twitter, of course. But that said, we see how you got into, you know, podcasting. Can we talk a little bit about F1 and kind of get your perspectives on where we're at?
Shoot, Brian.
So what we wanted to do was, now I really don't want to throw a guest under the bus right at the beginning when we're less than 7 minutes in, but
Have mercy, Rob. Have
I'm
mercy.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Span. Now, hindsight is a wonderful thing. As part of preparing for you coming on, I was listening to an interview you did with Grid Talk. This time, it was March last year.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
You made a prediction about the season to come.
How dare you? Lies. Absolutely.
Now, we're going to do a little thing here where we kind of do like heart versus head. What do we think will happen? What do we want to happen, right? You did say last year that Mercedes were going to absolutely annihilate the competition and that Red Bull would come in third, maybe lower. So that, in terms of setting the bar for predictions, that's just...
I still think that's a fair prediction. I actually think that's a fair prediction. It's not like there was some kind of core, deadening of Mercedes where they went in like a weird wrong direction. So with, for example, McLaren, 2012, reliability issues, but that was fundamentally a championship winning car. Lewis Hamilton leaves. Then they just start going in very strange directions. They start, there was a point where they fit a part on a front wing upside down for a little while and it worked better or some stuff like that. In 2015, they came out in testing and the rear wings had almost like a drag. They had ribs. So there was almost like a wall behind it. And then they came up with this statement no, we can't win anything with a Mercedes engine because you can't win if you're a customer team, which would have had way more impact if they were the second best car running a Mercedes engine. And they weren't. So there was a fundamental kind of downward spiral in what McLaren were up to. Whereas with Mercedes, I don't think that has happened. They went in the wrong direction. They're still fundamentally a good team. So I still think it was the right bet. And I think even going forward this season, you go second year of a regulation set. I think you would be foolish to say, I predict that Mercedes will not be title contenders. So I stand by that and I double down on it. And Red Bull third. Red Bull third, although, to be fair, in my predictions, I didn't predict that they would massively overspend on the budget cap in 13 different areas and bake in an advantage going forward into a new regulation set. So I feel vindicated. Actually, the thing I wouldn't have predicted, so Ferrari, right? There's two things here. I wouldn't have predicted them coming out so strong early in the season, but I 100% would have predicted their form dipping off throughout the season because for that has been the Ferrari way. They impressed so much in testing in... I think even 2016, they looked good in testing. 2017, they looked strong. 2018, they looked strong. All of those challenges faded as they went away. So I think as churlish as this may sound, judging a prediction by how it actually pans out isn't the best way to judge the prediction.
Of course it's not. Hindsight's a glorious thing. And I was literally just listening it to today. And when that came out, I was like, if you wanted to put things under things that don't age well. But you're absolutely right. At the time, you looked at the no side pod design. You're like, oh, my God, they found something no one else has done here. And this is going to kill it.
Oh, it's okay. So we had chats with the ex-Lotus Bosch, Matthew Carter, who was heading up the Janai group and was in that weird nose era in 2014, where the teams had this strange design box. Anyone listening who wasn't watching in 2014, go and Google F1 2014 nose. Okay, and there was some absolute shockers in there. All the noses were ugly, I think, except the Mercedes one. Actually, as far as I remember, which went quite conventional. The Caterham one was pornographic, and there's no other word for how the Caterham nose came. Do you remember that one? You remember that?
Yes, I made a hand gesture, but thankfully there's no video.
The Lotus car came out with these tusks, twin tusks, and they were asymmetric. So you had one short nose and then one long nose on the opposite. And Matthew Carter, he was really honest about it. He was like, we thought that was, either going to be genius or just not work at all. So when you see someone just go in a different direction, it's because it's either so brilliant that no one else has thought of it, or it's so stupid that no one else has thought of it. And so when they came out with the no side pods, you went, because it's Mercedes, you assumed, oh, this must be crazy good. But, it looks like they misstepped, and I'm not an aerodynamicist, but was this because there was no side pods, basically the air was just hitting the rear tires and disrupting the airflow over the tires or whatever. So look, if that Mercedes lines up at Bahrain, is that the season opener?
Yep.
And I'm neutral, so I'm just speaking for other Mercedes Lewis Hamilton fans. If that turns up with no side pods, I might shed a tear. For Mercedes fans.
Well, yeah, I mean, going back to your thing about saying predicting Ferrari falling away, as a self-confessed Ferrari fan, I've kind of just learnt to live with
Why?
that. Yeah, I don't
Oh
know.
my
I
God.
think it's something to do about red cars as
Oh,
a kid.
are you looking forward to the launch? Valentine's Day. Hello, darkness, my old friend.
He's already told his wife I'm not available that evening. I'll be watching the car.
It ruined
look
Valentine's
nice.
Day. Oh, yeah, it's a pretty car. Oh, I love the Tifosi. Have you been a Ferrari fan long?
I've been a Ferrari fan since the early night. When I first got into the sport, it was Nigel Mansell in the Williams, but at the same time, I always liked the red car. I liked the prancing horse. There was something about the Ferrari, even if I didn't always like all of the drivers. So it's weird. I've always been a Ferrari fan, regardless of who was in the car.
When was Mansell at Ferrari? Because I was a big Mansell fan.
Oh yeah, he was. Yeah,
Before my
Mansell was at
time.
Ferrari at
It was a bit. I think it was before Williams, wasn't it?
It was before Williams. So, because I got into it in the late 80s, early 90s, by the time I was really remembering watching races, Mansell had taken his glorious moustache across to the Williams. And I'd bought the Sky Electrics that had his car and the Yellow Lotus, and me and my brother used to fight over who got the Williams car. But yeah, but for whatever reason, kind of just Ferrari always stuck there. But yeah, okay, we had the Schumacher years and the Vettel never really panned out. But it's been barren for a while now. Yeah, that's the cross I bear.
Yeah, you're like Liverpool fans in the UK, who, like my generation, they grew up with a very successful Liverpool team. Everyone wanted to be a Liverpool fan, and then they just suffered 30 years of desert wilderness. And I delighted in that because I felt they were all glory seekers in the late 80s, early 90s. And that's the same way I feel about British Ferrari fans. So, there you go.
All right, when you guys are done talking about soccer, let me know. I'll tune back in.
We're talking about Ferrari. All those people going, oh yeah, I'm a massive like Ferrari fan and Schumacher fan and enjoying the sport while Ferrari dominated it and ruined it with their special magic tyres that no one else was allowed. Not that I've got skin in the game. As a internationally renowned reporter, I'm not a reporter at all. But yeah, the temptation is to try and be all like, oh, I don't have opinions about things. But if you bring up 90s, early 2000s Ferrari, I'm going to have opinions because I was so mad. As a sports fan, I was so mad during that period. I hated everything about it. 1990, I was a Damon Hill fan. So if you wanted to trigger me just by saying that you slightly like one team, well done. You've succeeded.
Nailed it.
Yeah, I mean, we will consider you triggered for the rest of the
What was the
conversation.
question? What was the question? Was the question, please rant about the late 90s Ferrari domination? Yes. If so, I have answered it in full.
You have, and I'm desperately trying to find some kind of slick segue into actually getting onto the track of what we wanted to talk about, but I'm grasping for thin air, so I'm just going to jump straight over to the other topic. So we're going to do this heart versus head. What do we think will happen? What do we want to happen? The first thing we want to look at is kind of the New Kids on the Block, and I'm old enough to remember those actually being a band, but we'll look at
I saw them in person.
How old am I? I'm 47 years old.
I'm going to admit something. I saw them in person.
Oh, wow.
Free concert from school.
How old are you, Brian?
I'm 93.
Oh my God! This podcast this is not a young, hip and happening.
It's not. This is old man corner. Like, I've heard you sometimes say about like you feel like you're an old man in the sport when you get younger people on. You get to be the young person this time because you're a few years younger than us, right?
I'm the youngest person on this podcast.
Yes, you are.
That is disgusting.
I'm 38. I've been 38 for many years now. But so
you're only 38.
Well, no.
Where was your paper round? Was it uphill? San Diego? Was it up there?
So when we look at the new drivers, the real new kids on the block, even though one of them is not young at all, we have Oscar, and just new to the grid, Oscar, Nick, and Logan, and there's new but not news, which we can get into next, but with Nico and others. But so when what would you rate highest? Who do you think is going to have the best return? And I don't just mean points, but I mean, in terms of impact for the team. Oscar at McLaren, Nick at AlphaTauri, or Logan at Williams. What are you kind of thinking of those three? And that you can do head-heart here. What do you think will actually happen? What do you hope happen?
In reverse order, you say? Okay.
Whatever you like. Go for
Logan Sargent. I'm glad there's an American. That's nice, isn't it, to have someone to root for? That must be lovely. But my bar for he's a billionaire, right?
Yeah, he's correct. His family's loaded. Yeah.
So my bar for getting excited about a billionaire coming into Formula One is limited. Like they will have to impress way, way more because in a sport where so many drivers, get out and around, and I've been lucky enough to speak to drivers at every level in the last 8 years. Funding is such a big part of it, and that's such a part of the challenge is proving that you're worthy of the funding. And that's not just driving. That is, it's consistency. If you have to prove funding, you can't crash. If you convince someone to put you in a GT3 car at the Nürburgring or at Le Mans, you can't crash that. And some people take huge personal risk with their insurance as well. So like they are driving around and knowing that if they have a crash, they're going to be bankrupt. That's the end of their career and they're in financial trouble. So in a sport where that is such a huge part of it, it's such a shortcut to be a billionaire. Like, it's a disgusting shortcut to be a billionaire. And literally they can just drive. They can just drive without fear. And it's, in much the same way, every pop star, is a billionaire now. Every actor you love is a billionaire. We're getting to that stage in Formula One. And I just get less excited because I know how much easier it is for them to get that seat at the table than it is for a non-billionaire. So, and it's less important to those guys as well because they have other lives. They have other things on the line. Right. Do you think Lawrence Stroll is really sat there obsessing day in, day out about Formula One in the same way that Christian Horner has? Christian Horner's, as much as he gets under my skin, Christian Horner has like lived and breathed day in, day out, to be a driver, to be a team boss, to build Red Bull from the ground up. Lawrence Stroll probably pays it some lip service. I'm sure he's committed to the team, but he's got business interests elsewhere. And I think when you're a Latifi, you know that when it goes wrong, you've got a seat at the company table. Right. So it's table. Yeah, well, it's just much, much harder to care about a billionaire coming into Formula One. Even Lando Norris, has come in, one of the most prepared drivers in history, everything at his plate, every resource available to him, and is pretty good. My bar for saying he's good is a lot higher. Like, I need him to be a generational talent before I think that he's won relative to his game. So Logan Sargent coming in. Who's his teammate going to be? That is
Alex.
Alex Albon.
Yep.
No. Is it? Oh, yes. Sorry, I was getting confused. Right, I beg your pardon. So, so that should be a beatable teammate. My prediction is he will not be Alex Albon. He won't make a dent. Albon will look fairly comfortable, and it will just be another billionaire in Formula One. Is that cool? Sorry if the chip on my shoulders interfered with the sound there. I just felt a big thud on the floor. But yeah, I can't get excited about Logan Sargent. If he wants to prove me wrong, as Lance Stroll has slightly gradually done over 6 years of unprecedented opportunity in Formula One to get to the
prioritization over his teammates,
to get to the point where he's fine, then yeah, maybe Logan Sargent could get to that point in my heart. Not that he would care.
Yeah, I mean, it's since moving here, the one thing it's really obvious is that America loves a winner, right? And I just don't see, as much as it's great to have an American in the sport, the local kind of fan base to have someone to get behind, I just see them being the guy that's probably coming last most. I hope
it could be.
My heart says I hope
last, couldn't it?
Yeah, I hope
it's a real
he's
possibility.
not. But he's not exactly coming into a car that's going to be really fighting for much, unless they really have a turnaround in the off season. So yeah, I want him to be better than I think he will be.
I'll try and inject some positivity into that.
Well, then I'm going to take a flyer. Let's go back to Oscar at McLaren. Oh. So this is either going to go way up or way down real fast.
So Oscar Piastri at McLaren has, of course, a much harder challenge. Again, like the previously mentioned Lando Norris, I've got a feeling, I've got no evidence for this at all, but given how dramatic the fall away in form was from Daniel Ricciardo, I cannot imagine that is truly representative. It feels like there's something like political, there's a relationship at McLaren where Lando Norris has his feet truly under the table. They're backing him. He's got a long contract still, or he originally signed quite a long contract, didn't he? I don't know how long is left. It's going to be a tough ask for Piastri. I think his tactic there is bide your time. Don't seem like too much of a threat. I think if you come in there alpha male, like a daddy bear, like Ricciardo did, I think there's going to be a political game. And I don't think this is a conspiracy, because you've had loads of stories over the years in Formula One about how certain drivers have got the team on board, even to the point that they've got mechanics from the other driver's side to kind of be fans of theirs. And I think winning the team is as important in Formula One as being out and out fast. Look at Verstappen. Is Verstappen genuinely, he's brilliant. And I would say I came under flat. I called him a generational talent and people got upset with me, but in his generation, he is absolutely the standout talent. But is he clear night and day better than Gasly? Clear night and day ahead of Alex Albon? Clear night and day ahead of Sergio Perez? To the extent of which he's shown that, surely a big chunk of that is the fact that he's won the team over and the team build towards him and favour him. And you see at Ferrari, it was Vettel who was out ahead and was untouchable. Then suddenly, like a light switch, his form drops off, Leclerc's faster. The teams can decide to a certain extent. So I think Piastri has to go in there, humble, be ready to learn, and get quite close, but not so close as to be threatening. Wait for Norris to go off to Audi or whatever, and then take it on board. So I wouldn't put any money on Piastri beating Lando Norris. I would just say, like, Piastri's job is to get in, show that he's solid. Oh, I'm learning. Say those things. Oh yeah, it's a learning year.
Yeah, and I think, and if he can do that and score enough points to not, like you say, rival Lando, but enough to help McLaren out, because really the constructors' title for McLaren last year was just whatever Lando scored. Because Danny
you've got to do better than Ricciardo, and everyone's going to go, yep, tick, done.
Yeah. Which leaves us with Nick rolling into the AlphaTauri. Now, this is going to sound bad. I just can't get excited about him in this car at all. And I don't know if it's because and this sounds really bad as well, that he's taken a long time to get into the sport, which is ridiculous because changing sports quickly, one of my favourite players as a youngster was Ian Wright at Arsenal. He didn't become professional till he was 28, so it shows you can achieve things at an older age. But
when did Damon Hill drive a F1 car for the first time?
When he was older.
85 years old. Yeah, but I think it was 30. Was he gone 30, wasn't he? Obviously, it's a different sport now. So I would say, yes, it is odd that Nick de Vries is, 28? And so it feels a little bit late to come into the sport. However, he was riding around in Formula E. That's a super competitive series. I mean, you can say what you want about the cars and the tech, but look at that driver lineup. That driver lineup is pretty brutal. You could put that driver lineup in any series bar F1 and they would be the best 20 drivers in most of those series. So look, it's a different world. I think that there are going to be some series that are truly competitive with Formula One in the future. So look, he's not been sat on his butt. He's not like Damon Hill or driving motorbikes going, oh, I fancy a go at cars and then jumping in. So I think out of the three, he's the one who's got the chance to come in and beat Tsunoda. Because we're talking teammate battles, aren't we, ultimately?
Yep.
Yeah. So Tsunoda is the one, I think that's the one that favours our rookies the most.
So, Spanners, I got a question for you. Looking at AlphaTauri last year, just when you mentioned Tsunoda, we had a lot of conversations through the year. What was going on with Pierre and Yuki? And I sort of came into the year expecting Pierre to have a great season. And then I couldn't figure out if it was the car, and then Yuki was out qualifying him at times, and I just couldn't figure out who was better and what happened to the Pierre Gasly of the prior couple years. And
he
now,
looked like an animal, yeah.
Yeah, he did. It felt like he was reinvigorated when he got back to AlphaTauri. And, from his victory and just all the things he did with the team. So I kind of have transitioned to a different question. What are you anticipating from him at Alpine this year?
So 2 years doing really well at AlphaTauri. Just one season where you underwhelm and you get demoted to Renault. Nightmare, isn't it? Nightmare stuff. Here's Renault. Stop calling it Alpine. I won't disrespect it by calling it Alpine. I see what you did there. This is hurting our reputation. Best, should we dip out? Well, we could just call it Alpine instead of Renault. No one's going to know. They won't fit.
Alpine makes one car, right? Just the A110, as far as I'm aware. I'm not even. Do they make other cars? Just that one?
Changing to Alpine. So we're going to move facility? No, we're going to stay. We're going to stay. Okay, but we need some new staff or whatever. Just get rid of Cyril, and that'll be enough. That'll be enough. But it did seem like a face-saving rebrand to me, and probably I would say easily the most underperforming team pound for pound is certainly Alpine. So I don't know. Did Gasly always felt to me like he had he was on the edge all the time in the Red Bull driver program. I don't know if you can go back to when he was first promoted to F1. There was rumors. I think he all but announced he leaked that he was going to be promoted to Toro Rosso, which was AlphaTauri. And then Helmut Marko came out and said, no, you're stupid. Why have you done that? And I think he sat out a year, basically. He talked himself out of an F1 drive, if I'm remembering it right. And then he obviously got that promotion to Red Bull. How long did he last? How many races did he run?
It wasn't very long, was it?
Wasn't very long at all, was it? And was that Albon that replaced him?
Albon.
Yeah. Okay. So hang on. Look, here's the how did the Red Bull succession go? So you had Vettel left, and you had Ricciardo, and then Kvyat got promoted.
Right.
And then did Kvyat then bump into Vettel 8 times in a row?
Oh, yes,
and
the torpedo.
Yeah, he got booted out by Barcelona, didn't he? And that was when Verstappen came in to Red Bull. And did he won a race very early on, didn't he? Oh, did he win the first race? Barcelona?
Yeah.
Yeah, he won the first race and held off Kimi Räikkönen. Yeah, possibly. And then what? Gasly came in?
And then Albon.
And then Albon, yeah. So it's been a brutal kind of succession in that Red Bull team. But Gasly then kind of gets bumped back and gets another chance to impress AlphaTauri, and it kind of looked like it did.
I thought it did for a couple years. I thought it did.
Or was he just being flattered by Tsunoda getting up to speed?
I mean, and he had Kvyat for a year as well as his partner before Tsunoda. So
Exactly.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
I think Ocon is a brilliant benchmark. If you want to ask how is Gasly doing, give it a quarter of a season, give it till Barcelona, and then I think it's a good honest comparison, because Ocon's gone up against the likes of Perez. We've seen him up against Alonso. I'm struggling to remember who his other teammates were, but he seems to have generally always have been very aggressive, fighting, but ultimately fallen short of those teammates. So Gasly's got to come in. You absolutely have to beat Ocon for your career.
So one more follow-up. Just how do you view people getting used to a new car? Because Pierre has to get used to the new car.
I'm a middle-aged broadcaster. I have no idea how to
Put
get
an
used to
idea out there for me.
So in the olden days, I think people used to expect you get into that new car and it is now prove it or lose it. I think if you look at, which season was it? There was a season where the regulations changed sufficiently that all 6 drivers that moved teams struggled for half a year. And I am drawing a bit of a blank on what season it was. It was the season Ricciardo moved to McLaren, Vettel moved to Aston Martin. It was only a couple of years back.
Yeah,
but there was one season where, for the first half of the season, every driver that moved teams, except Carlos Sainz, actually, was struggling. So I think in this era, it's taking drivers a long time to get used to a new car. And I think an engine, I don't understand why, but I think an engine change seems to affect drivers as well. So I'm happy to give drivers half a season to get on top of the car and then judge them.
Okay, so that's the line in the sand. Half a season, and then Spanners is anything beyond that, and then it's just too much.
Then I'm watching you, kiddo. Yeah. Then I'm watching you.
Well, talking about half a season or the calendar per se, we got 2 different races coming up this year that are going to be under the spotlight for different reasons. We'll throw Miami in as well, maybe if we have time, but I'm really interested in the Vegas-Monaco dynamic, right? Because for me, especially kind of coming over here now and seeing things and the reaction of, I'm going to go against my own kind here, but those Europeans that don't like these Americans coming into the sport, right? We've got this Vegas race coming, which is going to be all glamour and glitz, and it's nothing about the race. It's all about the show, and how dare they put on a show. And then we're going to go to Monaco, and everyone's going to
having fun. This is Formula One. This is Formula One. Stop it.
But then we're going to go to Monaco, and everyone's going to be really happy with the show, because with the glamour and the glitz, because they all know the show's not going to be very good. Because as soon as you can put the word traditional on something, it gets a free pass. Now, don't get me wrong. For some bizarre reason, I love Monaco. I probably have never really enjoyed a race that much, but I do like Monaco weekend.
The qualifying is great.
If you're wrong about that, what else are you wrong about?
Well, yeah, true. But I don't really. You can probably count on one hand great races at Monaco, right? And if you take weather out of it and say about like weather didn't intervene, you've probably got none. So is it tradition? Why does Monaco get the free pass for glamour and glitz? And what do we think we're going to be staring down the barrel of with Vegas?
Me, Brian.
Anybody that wants to answer my question.
Well, the problem I've got, Brian, is I'm waiting for some contracts to come through, which will dictate my answer massively. And also, if you want me to, if you want to give me a paddock pass to your venue, that will change my answer on any podcast I happen to be on. I am actually excited about Vegas and it is because of the peripherals to it, and because it is the Americans embracing Formula One, which has been a deep wish of mine as an F1 fan. And I'm sure, as a British F1 fan, I'm a bit of a Americanophile. You know, I really love American culture. I love American comedy, entertainment, and for Americans to finally embrace the sport I love, it's been really, really exciting for me. Of course, like Indianapolis, you'll remember the pain because it's like showing your cousin, like, oh, we got this really cool toy, and then you go to Indianapolis and only 6 cars end up starting the race, and it's an embarrassment because the Michelin running tires. Basically, they couldn't take the banking or something, or couldn't take one of the corners for fear of exploding. So 6 races, and every American going, "Oh, that's F1, is it? Nice one." So from that point of view, you know, and if you're embraced in Vegas, you know, you're being embraced by America and the razzmatazz. I think F1 could really do with some razzmatazz. Do you remember when there was the first Circuit of the Americas? And they were like, in the red corner, Fernando Alonso. And I loved that. It was so much fun. And I loved how angry stuffy Europeans got about it as well. Yeah, go on.
No, I was going to say, I loved it 2 years ago when Shaq brought the trophies up to the podium and didn't realize he had to leave. And he just stood there on the podium with the drivers. And he was taller than everybody by a lot still. They're on podiums. And he's just standing there like, yeah, I'm going to hang out here in my blue polo. I'm part of this. God
I think
bless America.
Felipe Massa could have had a shoulders ride from Lewis Hamilton. And they still wouldn't have been as tall as Shaq. But look, I think, like, you know, I think this whole thing, this whole American revolution is a shake-up that a pretty sensible kind of stuffy European sport has needed. And like Monaco is a perfect example of that because they want to be called the jewel in the crown. But like, what happens at Monaco that anyone outside of the prince can enjoy? Like, I'm sure Justin Bieber enjoyed his time at Monaco. I'm sure he got wined and dined, but was there pizzazz for the viewers? I think the Las Vegas race will be a spectacle. At least it will be a spectacle. Miami tried to be that as well. And I don't mind a little bit of excitement. The race is going to be, I would imagine, pretty bad. Like Miami has kind of set the bar pretty low for, here's a pretty temporary, because it is a temporary track, isn't it? It's a car park around the stadium.
Yeah, Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. Yeah.
They didn't get the surface right. They didn't get the layout right. Now, is Vegas going to get that right? Vegas looks like it's got basically long straights in a square. So maybe it's got some big braking zones, but it still kind of looks like 90-degree corners, which never really seems to work out. So F1, I always wish they would consider the TV viewers that are dirt poor. Like you, obviously, you two are fantastically wealthy. I'm sure you go to 8 Grand Prix a year, but for me, it's been a TV sport. So I feel mixed. Is that a fair answer? I feel mixed.
I think it is, and because we debated, like, again, I'm a bit like you, especially now I live here. I almost get offended sometimes with the anti-American sentiment, especially around Miami, right? And in the build-up to Miami, they couldn't do right for doing wrong. So when there was this rumor that the marina was going in, oh, they're idiots. They're going to put water on the track. What if it springs a leak? It's going to be ridiculous. Oh, no, don't worry. It's not real. It's fake. What do you mean it's fake? Oh, my God, that's ridiculous. And it was like, no matter what they did in that Miami Grand Prix, it was going to be wrong with the rest of the world. And that just really annoys me. Yeah. Part of me also thinks that, you know, this is a long-term play for F1 in America. They need the big glamour and glitz of Vegas, even if that doesn't stay on the calendar forever. You can't go in, all these people saying, oh, we need to go back to Watkins Glen or, you know, what's the other one off Gran Turismo that I can never remember? Laguna Seca. They're not big enough.
What you wish for.
They're not big enough for F1 cars. And
I think at Laguna Seca they could go off the top of the corkscrew and then they could land at the start-finish straight.
But again, because even if they are, you know, in some people's views, proper circuits and not street circuits or temporary circuits, you've got to get the excitement. You've got to get the eyeballs on the sport first, and maybe custom-built, you know, proper tracks out in the middle of nowhere can come later. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to it. I don't have big hopes that the race will be fantastic. It just needs to be better than the worst ones out there. It needs to beat Paul Ricard. It needs to beat Mexico from last year. It just needs to. They need not to be the worst one.
Vegas, baby, Vegas.
Oh, I've never been to Vegas, and I think I'm actually going out in a F1 related event in March.
Ooh,
just
nice.
to, like, as a part of like laying the foundations for the event is in November, isn't it? The race is actually in November. Snow in November in Vegas? No, I'm assuming not. So still desert. So with these, if you've got like a blank slate, I haven't studied the track at Vegas, but if you were planning that circuit, I think you would look at modern tracks that have what's worked and what hasn't worked. And you say, well, Baku, that big long straight saves Baku. Aside from that big long straight, that is the same as that's Sochi, that is Monaco, that is Singapore. without that big straight. And that big long straight with the 90-degree left at the end causes drama. It causes the odd safety car. Look at the Baku races that have been good, and it has been due to a crash and a safety car, or the red flag in 21 that had that 2-lap sprint with the brake magic. So, but without that, it's all the street tracks have kind of sucked hard. And so with Vegas, you go, right, you got an opportunity. Is there big wide roads in Vegas? Is everything 90 degrees? Is it city blocks?
It's going to be a lot of 90 degrees. There's a big long straight down the strip, but then they actually bought some property to put in a chicane and build a store. Believe it or not, kind of a couple buildings behind the MGM. So it's going to be. I don't know. We'll see. It's an upside down pig, and America loves bacon. So there you go.
So hopefully they didn't just go, "Oh, people love street tracks, 90 degrees. That'll be fine." If you just look at the things that foul other circuits, like Singapore, with all its 90-degree turns and being narrow, despite being wonderful. Look at what's the best part of Singapore is probably the left chicane in sector 1, and that's nice and wide open and allows for a little bit of racing. Surely, you look at things like that and you try and recreate it, or you go look at Mexico, look at the stadium section that they try to build. It's a pretty decent track. You put one good overtaking point at turn 1, and then you have the stadium section, which just slows everyone down and spreads the whole field out. So you just got to hope that the people planning that, there was that one guy in the room that is like, guys, I've been watching F1 for ages and I've got some ideas. Just tell me there was that, and it wasn't. It must pass this business. It must pass this hotel.
Yeah, I mean, it can't... Well, this could be famous last words, but surely it can't be as bad as the original Vegas Grand Prix. Now, I'm not old enough to have seen any of that, but I've watched some of those things and seen that track they literally put in the back of a casino car park, and it was terrible. So at least they got that bar to beat, right?
The Caesar's Palace, cursive Z. Or
That's
Zed, or whatever you would call it. But yeah, that was what it was.
But by the time we get to Vegas, we're going to be, end of November. So where have they slotted that in? Is it like last but one, or it's into the last handful of races,
I think
right?
Brazil and then Abu Dhabi,
yes.
probably.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the 2 titles. 2 questions. Who do you think is going to take each of the titles? And will it even still be up for grabs by the time we hit the Vegas? Brian, I'm going to let you go for this time while Spanners thinks about it.
I think Max is going to repeat. I think he is a generational talent. I like the way you said that, Spanners. I'm not a Max fan, but he...
Why? Why not? Why are you a hater? Why?
I'm not a hater. I find him a little aggressive and annoying and pretentious.
He's mean. He's mean, isn't he?
Pompous,
that's why I don't like him.
Self-important. I could keep going. But so...
He's mean. Like, you think if you were in the pub, he would just make fun of you and you wouldn't have a good time.
Right.
That's
But he's an amazing driver. Like, amazing. And he gets his elbows out at the right times, maybe crosses the line a little, but not so much that he's always at fault. Anyway, I got Max, and then constructors... I actually have Mercedes. Even though I just read Ferrari found some extra horsepower, I read that like an hour ago. I'm going Mercedes because I think George is actually good. Sorry.
Don't have to apologize for George being good. That's
okay. I got Lewis is still great. George great. I have Mercedes taking the constructors, and I'm a Checo fan, Spanners, so that hurts me to say.
Get in, vamos.
Yes.
Let's do it.
So it hurts me to say they're not getting the constructors with Max winning the drivers. Rob, over to you. We'll let Spanners take us home.
No, I don't think that's an insult to Perez. I just think that they will design it so far in the direction of Verstappen, and they have very opposing styles.
Rob,
yeah, I mean, I
next.
would, I want to see it go. I want to see it go to the wire. I almost said like Abu Dhabi, but let's backtrack from that one. But going into the last race would be awesome. I would accept right now it not being over before the summer break like it blatantly was last year. Bonotto coming out and saying, yeah, we could win 100 races in a row. Yeah, you could. I might be able to swim across the Atlantic, but I won't. So I just wanted to see it go on longer. I'd like the interest to be there later in the season. I think... My heart would love to see Ferrari get back on board, but I get laughed out of court for that one. So I have to echo you, Brian. I can't see beyond a Max title. And I do think Mercedes, if they carry on that momentum that we saw at the end of last season, if they got all over the early season things, then I think Ferrari are in trouble here. They've got a new guy at the helm. They're going to have to get through those kind of organisational changes. So I think Mercedes keep the momentum and they take the constructors.
Wait, time out. Before we let Spanners answer the last question before 100 seconds of DRS, the 2 guys who host this pokey little podcast just agreed without having talked about it, and we have the same people winning. What fun is it to listen to that?
Don't worry.
Boring.
Yeah, exactly. To all the
Spanner,
listeners,
say something controversial that shoots both of us down.
exactly.
You guys know the tennis player Emma? Oh,
I don't know how to pronounce her last name.
Raducanu, the English one.
Raducanu. Yeah, the English lady, and she won the New York Open. Just blew everyone away, and hasn't been able to win anything since because people realised how to play against sort of her style. I'm not a tennis fan, but she's sort of not got found out, but she surprised the world, and now she's settled into probably a more normal position for someone with her age and experience. So I think there is an element of that with Verstappen. I think we've seen the peak surprise element of Verstappen because at Toro Rosso, he was so aggressive. He took Vettel out in Shanghai. He was just clashing wheels with everyone. He was unapologetic, and it kind of didn't matter because he was down the grid at Toro Rosso. And then when he was really aggressive at Red Bull, Hamilton would kind of laugh and go like, I'll just get out of his way because he wasn't a threat, and it kind of didn't matter. So everyone sort of thought he was. People forget how much of a wild card he was. He was so wild that people thought it was that couldn't possibly be the right way to go about things. He was that wild. 2021 comes along, he gets under Lewis Hamilton's skin. Not only that, but he comes in with a style of driving and racing so extreme that it goes one of two ways. Either it's the double diffuser, where everyone around him has to then go, oh, we all need a double diffuser. We all need to drive like Max Verstappen, or it goes frick, like the Mercedes hydraulic system, where the authorities go, okay, very good. I see what you did there, but that is now banned and you can't do that. So to some extent, they have clamped down. They've made kind of Verstappen rules in the racing. Some of the rules have been designed around Max Verstappen specifically, like the no weaving, the two moves down the straight, the whole stuff about the apex and owning the corner was kind of around Verstappen. They even
the safety car restart where you are behind the
exactly great example. And then Abu Dhabi, before Abu Dhabi, they even made a statement saying if the two drivers clash, we do have the ability to take away driver points to punish a driver, because there was a feeling that Verstappen would happily have them both crash out and he'd win the title with no points. So Verstappen came in with that fierce an attitude, and it was something different to everyone else. So it's almost as different as Michael Schumacher coming in with his physicality. So he came in, Michael Schumacher, he was fit, he was strong, he was tough, and you either had to be Michael Schumacher or just get out of the sport. So by the time Schumacher retired, every kid that was coming through was at least Michael Schumacher standard. Like, he raised the game that much. So Verstappen has raised the game in aggression. Either everyone has to match him or they end up doubling down. He's not a surprise package anymore. He's the double world champion now. So people will treat him differently. They will race differently to him. He will get judged differently. So I'm sure in Abu Dhabi there was a slight exhaustion. Sorry, I should have said 2021, not specifically Abu Dhabi. But I'm sure there was a slight exhaustion with Lewis Hamilton winning everything. And that's in the back of race directors' minds. That's in the back of media minds. That effect has gone. So whilst he is a brilliant driver, like you said, that surprise, that shock effect of him being a driver probably went, his driving style probably ended in 2021. In 2022, Red Bull came out with the dominant package because Ferrari fell away and Mercedes fluffed. I still think Mercedes are a good enough team to win if they don't fluff. So I'm not sitting here thinking Verstappen is such a phenomenal once in a blue moon talent that he's going to overcome all odds. I think we have seen the peak extra effect Verstappen's going to have. Does that make sense? He's a good driver, but he had this extra effect with his attitude, with his aggression, which is down to him. That's all on him. That's all praise to him. But that effect, he will get understood by his rivals and the sport better.
So who do you have as taking the title then? Is that a long way around to say that you think that Max won't take it? Or
Honestly, I learned from experience a little while back. I guested on this podcast, and what they did was they actually dragged up predictions from a year ago, and they just tore me apart. And I vowed on that day I would never make a podcast prediction ever again.
So I've got a prediction which I think it didn't come true last year, but I stand by it that it would definitely come true this year. The more I saw of Mercedes at the end of last year, the more I believe it, which is that Lewis Hamilton will become the first ever driver to surpass the 300 race mark and win a race, because everyone else that's gone into the 300 club has just quietly disappeared out the back door at the moment. Yeah. Fernando's in there trying to do it, but I think Lewis absolutely has to win one this year. Disagreeing, so I'm taking that as I'm right.
Yeah. Oh yeah, if you look what a disaster 2022 was for the first 6-7 months of it. So like in a normal season, Hamilton was going to win a race, and then his best chance, he had a bit of a fluff with Alonso at Spa. That was for the lead, wasn't it? That was for the lead, wasn't it? When he had that, he went around the outside of Alonso, cut in a little bit early, and
I'm trying to remember what you're talking about.
Himself out.
I mean, he had a couple. Yeah,
he had a couple of.
Oh, it's Spa early on. Yeah, he hit him. He ran over his tire, went flying off at.
That was in first place, wasn't it? That was for first.
Yeah, I think it might have been. And we also had at the end when George won his. It looked like Lewis might be building up to chasing George down. It never quite came to fruition, but he'll do it. Mark my words, he will this year. And also, of things that we're going to mark my words that are going to happen, what's going to happen next, and I know that you're excited all the way through this episode to wait for it, which is that we're going to put you through the 100 seconds of DRS. I did the last one that we did with Matt.
It wasn't the first, I was wrong, sorry.
That's okay. We wouldn't have put on a little bit afterwards when we record the outro to point out you were wrong. We would never have done that.
I believe I got one thing wrong ever.
So, Brian, you're going to ask the questions, right? And I'm going to do the timer. So,
yes.
Brian, are you ready to ask the questions?
I am ready.
Spanners, are you ready to answer?
And so I just spitball.
Yep, it's rapid fire. You'll get the hang of it pretty quick. This is very lowbrow entertainment. You'll be
okay. It's just I don't really do quick answers generally. So what? One word, 2 words. What are we doing?
A lot of them are yes, nos, or very one-word answers. You'll be all right.
A lot of them. How many are there?
Well, as many as we can get into 100 seconds. Yeah. I mean, basically, you could answer one question for 100 seconds and we'll be done. So.
Well, I regret this, so my job is to make you regret it more. Here we go.
Okay, I'm going to count you in. Here. 3, 2, 1, begin.
What's your favorite F1 track?
Silverstone, mate. Sorry.
First poster you had on your bedroom wall?
Okay, this was from the Telegraph. It was a double-page spread of Jos Verstappen in the Benetton with the pit crew. They put the fuel hose out too early, and it ignited, and he's in a ball of flames.
Favorite F1 livery of all time?
Oh, mate, come on, 7-Up.
Oh, wow, all right, yeah, not bad. Is it pronounced GIF or GIF?
I don't know. I'm going to say GIF.
All right, you're wrong. Mario or Luigi?
Mario, of course. I've got a main character vibe. Come on.
If you could add a James Bond type gadget to an F1 car, what would it be?
Oil slick, 100%.
Well, Ferrari was giving those out last year. Coffee or tea?
Coffee. I know I'm betraying the English, but I do like my black coffee.
Fill in the blank. F1 in America is?
Good for monetizing F1 podcasts.
Sleep in or up early?
Oh, man. Burn the midnight oil. Just do everything you can. Take inspiration. Pour yourself a gin. Just keep working and pushing until your eyes go blurry and pass out. And don't worry about that cockerel in the morning.
Tires. Tires, are they interesting or not interesting?
They are boring as hell. Yes! Any F1 podcaster that just bangs on about tires needs to resign themselves to forever being the co-host of Missed Apex podcast.
Least favorite errand or chore to do?
Least favorite errand or chore to do. Oh, do you know, I really hate cat litter trays, because my cat, he poops in the litter tray and then he has this very specific meow, like meow. Like, that's yours to sort out. And only me. He seems to go just to me and go meow. And it's like, yeah, I did it in that poopy tray. It's your problem, human.
And on that exclusive,
did I win? Do I win a hat? Do I win a? What's going on?
You win. No, you don't win anything. Oh, thank you for doing that. And I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get an image of a cat litter tray out of my head for the rest of the night now. So thank you for the chat.
Well, look, I think it establishes dominance. So Brian, if you want to take over the podcast, you just go to Rob's house, you poop in the corner, and you just meow at him.
Well, I've been sending him FedEx boxes of it for the last couple of weeks, and it hasn't slowed him down in recording.
I told you it was him, Rob. I told you when you were complaining about that.
Oh my gosh, Spanners! Thank you so much for coming on our humble little podcast. You are an absolute pro, and we just, I have slightly fanboyed having you on today because I listened to the Missed Apex for a while, and you guys are brilliant. So I know you dropped the website earlier on, but please drop it again one last time to promote the Missed Apex.
Missed Apex podcast. .com? No, yeah, missedapexpodcast.com. Yeah. Did I get it right before time?
Yes.
If I did,
I don't know now. You've confused me now because I'm not sure you said the same thing as at the beginning. But
we're so pro that we have like multiple domains. So also missedapex.net. There you go.
There it is.
And follow me at Spanners Ready on Twitter as well.
And I was just going to say that. I follow you. It's a great follow at Spanners Ready on Twitter. Yeah. So thanks, man, for doing this. Really a pleasure to meet you and have a conversation. And look forward to talking again one day soon.
Good luck with the podcasting, guys. Keep pushing. It's so lovely that the F1 world and the F1 content creation world has grown so much, and you can just have F1 conversations online all day, every day if you want. But it needs nice people because there's a lot of gits out there. There's a lot of turnips out there. There's a lot of people trying to make the F1 fan experience miserable and horrible. And from what I can see, one of you is a nice guy, the other one not so much. But
and then there's Rob.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go with that. But so let's just make the F1 community a nice place and just have fun.
Thanks, Spanners. We appreciate it. Thanks for being on. Amazing. Spanners, thanks for being part of the dirty side and kind of giving us your perspective, and just tremendous to hear some of the story on the recording and off around how they've grown to 2 million listens last year. And great perspectives. Really fun having you on, ton of energy. And thanks for doing the 100 seconds of DRS, which I will say to all of our listeners, if anybody's interested in tackling the 100 seconds of DRS, please let us know on Twitter at F1 Dirty Side. You can shoot us a tweet or into our DMs, whatever works, or you can find us on the web, www.dirtysideofthetrack.com, and our email. So Spanners, thanks again for being so generous with your time and thoughts.
Very jealous of his voice. He's just got as soon as he mentioned he'd worked in radio before, yeah, you've got that radio voice. I don't know if you have to practice to do that, whether you just get born with it, but...
do you think he walks up to the drive-through window at places? I'd like a grilled cheese sandwich.
He's just so much. Okay. We're not really sure what we're doing next. But we didn't really know what we were doing for either of the last two. So,
and they were bangers of episodes.
And they've been massive. Matt was amazing, Spanners was amazing, so next week could be just as amazing. Or it could just be me and Brian, which, let's be honest, 2 purple sectors and a green sector, that'll be fine.
Green.
I gave us green, Brian.
You're very generous. Everybody, thanks for listening this week. Have a wonderful week, and we will catch up to you again next Sunday.